All right, folks, we are back. It's the Alex Jones Show. I am Jason Burmis, sitting in. Alex on the ground in Hardin, Montana, where they've recently launched a privatized foreign mercenary service at a local prison there. And again, the guy they put at the head of it, multiple felon, 17-plus aliases, over $1 million in lost civil suits. And he's calling himself Michael Hilton. But he has many, many aliases, and we are trying to find out who are his boss. Becky Shea, who's doing PR for them, refusing to discuss who the parent company is. But with your vigilant efforts, our listeners out there, I'm sure we will get the truth soon enough. Joining me now is really a legend, somebody I've been following for years and years and years, somebody I followed even before Alex Jones. I came across him talking about his initial publication, The War Conspiracy. I believe that was back in 1972. He's an author, he's a poet, and in my mind, he's a genius. Peter Dale Scott, how are you today, sir?
I'm very happy to be here. You in your fine new studio.
Well, thank you very much. Why don't you just give people that don't know who you are, who are not familiar with you, what your background is, what your work has been. I mean, you've done so much. You've done work on, RFK, JFK, MLK assassinations, extensive work on the continuity of government programs, extensive work into deep politics and 9/11, just a huge body of work.
Yes, well, actually, all this time until I retired, I was a professor of English. So the question is, why would I get into these other fields? The answer is that before that, I'm a Canadian, and I was a diplomat for the Canadian government, and I had just enough exposure to Indochina in the 1950s to be a very early advocate that America should not make the mistake of the French and go into Vietnam. And then in researching what was wrong, the reasons why we shouldn't go into Vietnam, I became aware of Kennedy's decision to pull troops out, which was made in October of '63 and then reversed the weekend that he was killed by incoming President Johnson. And so that got me inevitably interested in the Kennedy assassination. And from all of that, I've just, for those of you who are old enough to remember the 60s, it was a terrible decade because Bobby Kennedy was killed, Martin Luther King was killed. There were some other minor assassinations, too. And so I, at the time, used to talk about that my specialty was researching parapolitics. And now I usually use the term deep politics, which is seems to have taken a term which will outlast me. I think the people will continue to talk about it, and I have a book by that title. So that is, and I've continued to study it because I have my conviction that if you study all of these suppressed events, you find certain elements in common. By knowing more about the Kennedy assassination, it prepares you in a way to be able to study 9/11. And I know that's an odd idea, but I have a book that's the revised reissue of The War Conspiracy lays out the case for saying that those two events have something in common.
Is that back in publication? Because
yeah, there's a new edition. It's not the old book. It's because this one actually talks about 9/11 and so on. It came out last year.
Wow!
And if you Google for me, you'll get my website, and then from there you'll see how to get the revised War Conspiracy.
Wow, just a great interview coming up for you folks that are not familiar with Peter Dale Scott. Let me tell you, that was 1972 to put out a revised edition. 36 plus years later is just excellent in my mind. I can't wait to check it out. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the Obama administration. We're going to talk about the wars in the Middle East. This is the Alex Jones Show. He'll be coming up at the bottom of the hour. PrisonPlanet.tv, INFOWARS.com. We are back. It's the Alex Jones Show. I'm joined by Peter Dale Scott in studio. A real treat for me. And during the break, we were just discussing this Michael Hilton character. And you were just discussing how you looked into the crest and how this was the crest of Montenegro.
Well, actually, Serbia.
Serbia.
Can the camera pick this up?
Absolutely.
This coat of arms was the coat of arms of the Obrenović family, who were the rulers, the kings of Serbia down until 1903, when the last one was, I think, assassinated, and then you got the Karađorđevićes, who were the kings up until World War II. The only surviving line of that family are the people who call themselves the princes of Montenegro. And this Hilton, Michael Hilton, was really Michael Djokovic, is apparently from Montenegro. So for some reason, if you have that's an imperial double eagle, a sign of empire. And here is a king. It's a sign. A crown is a sign of monarchy. What's that doing on the side of a police car in Hardin, Montana?
Which isn't really a police car. I mean, they're saying they're American police force. Well, they're not American. Right. They're not a police force. Right. And the guy heading this up is a multiple felon with yesterday it was a dozen aliases. Now they're reporting 17 aliases plus. Did you ever see this coming in our country? Did you ever think we'd be at a time where prisons are set up, they're going to be run by foreign mercenaries, and they're going to be training foreign troops? It's nightmarish.
And foreigners arresting Americans in America. And also the part of it that really scares me is the outsourcing of the job of spying on Americans. That's now being handled by private companies. I did an article about this recently. Science Applications and SAIC, they are composed of veterans of intelligence, but they're a private corporation with a contract to various departments of the U.S. government, and they've been assigned the job of correlating the job of spying on Americans. So there are these special stations set up all over America where members of Army counterintelligence sit in the same office with members of SAIC, private people spying on us. I went all through the Vietnam War, and I knew my phone was tapped, and I knew that my mail was, odd things happened to my mail. And it didn't particularly bother me because I like this country. I'm not even an American. I'm a Canadian, but I like America. And I sort of wanted them to know what I was doing because I was not planning to put bombs anywhere, and I would prefer that they knew that. But I'm very uncomfortable that the job of watching me is now being handed out to private corporations because they really have, they have a profit motive. One of the things that went wrong in Iraq, this same company, SAIC, was given the job of finding out whether there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq or not. And it was big business for them to report, yes, there is, because that meant more contracts and more money. And, of course, this was one of the biggest intelligence fiascos of the last, 50 years probably, because we waged a whole war on the pretext of the weapons of mass destruction, which absolutely weren't there when they went to look for them. So the Bush administration set up a committee to find out what went wrong, and they put all the SAIC people on the committee. So obviously they were unable to find, or they failed to report that SAIC had been a big part of the problem. That's what's wrong with privatizing intelligence, because a profit motive is going to skew the intelligence. And the same thing with privatizing security. I don't know who was really responsible for stirring up trouble in Pittsburgh. I mean, time after time after time, you have peaceful protests, which are then broken up in a violent way by the people whose nominal job is to prevent violence, but they have a stake as private corporations in prolonging the violence that they're supposed to be stopping.
Well, we're talking about even the LRAD weapons that they used at this thing, the long-range acoustical devices. We find out today, the Washington Times, DHS helps local police nationwide buy military-style sonic devices. This is huge business for the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about on his exit from the presidency. This is them really coming into fruition. And you talked about private security firms spying on the American people. We know through the lawsuit Hepting versus AT&T that AT&T and other companies had secret rooms where they split off all the information. Everything that went through a data cable, everything that went through your cell phone was then hardlined into a database. Now, I'm not saying that that's all tracked through human eyes, but it is sent through systems like Carnivore and Promise, and they look for key words, key phrases. In essence, they're spying on the American people 24/7.